Hello, everybody. That's Lenny Murphy. Welcome to the recording of the exchange. If you're following along, we're just Murphy's Law. I'm taking credit for this as a Murphy. Some reason that it just won't go live with LinkedIn. Our tech team's going to figure it out. Karen and I decided, let's just record the session, get it up, get it out. That's what's going to happen now. So, but happy Friday.
And we're really sorry about that because we know so many of you had signed up to join us live, and that's really, really great. And so thank you for that. Please be patient with us. We'll try to make sure it's live the next time. We're just going to chat though and share what we were going to share anyway, just with less of that live feeling.
Yes.
It's like pseudo live. It's like live adjacent.
Yes, I mean we're still live and unrehearsed. It's just
it is 12:15, folks.
I know.
It's only 15 minutes later.
That's perfectly acceptable in some European and Latin American countries. So right. Time has a different meaning. Anyway, all right, Karen. Get us on track.
Here's what we're going to talk about today. The thing is, AI just isn't going to leave us alone for a while. But mostly, we're going to start there because we have two different things that came in from people who are listening to us. So last week, I think it's Luis Duram, Director of Product Development at Atlanteus Search in Mexico. He shared with us that he wanted us to cover a white paper written by two economists at Microsoft, one of whom's a senior researcher, and the other one is an assistant professor at Harvard Business School. And coming out of their research were two things, and I know, Lenny, you also saw the white paper and took a look at it. GPT 3.5, widely used LLM, it's responding to a set of survey questions in ways that are consistent with economic theory, so not inconsistent results. That's how I interpret that statement. And then also, estimates of willingness to pay for products and features generated by GPT 3.5 are realistic magnitudes and match estimates from a recent study. I'm going to pause right with actual consumers. I'm going to pause right there to help you interpret what that means for people, because that's not necessarily the language I've always spoken, but I can read it and say, that sounds like it's pretty darn good, Lenny.
Yeah, I mean, so here's my take on that, right? My understanding of how the LLM models work is that they're incredibly good at synthesizing existing information. So it's not a surprise to me that it could duplicate the results of a study because it is referencing past studies. So now, obviously, that's overly simplistic. There's a lot more going on behind the scenes, and I get that. But that's not shocking to me. I know of other examples. There was a colleague of ours, Julian, from Savio, that he tested duplicating a segmentation study that he had done previously with a client, only utilizing ChatGPT, and they got to the same result. Process was radically different. Output, final result, was very similar.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So I think that's not surprising.
Yeah.
I do not think that means, though, that we can. If you're trying to explore breakthrough innovation, if you're trying to explore new concepts, if you're trying to explore things that are rapidly changing cultural conditions, et cetera, right? When there's new inputs coming in, I don't think it's there yet that we could say just run the AI on it and get the same. Expect that it's going to be similar. And I do think simply because the data doesn't exist at scale yet, that it's going to capture the nuance of why, right? I suspect there is no behavioral science or behavioral economics components, and there are arguments to be made when it comes to pricing and willingness to buy, that there's a whole other perspective to use on that based on behavioral science. So I think it's incredibly interesting. It's promising. As a validation, I think it has amazing applications, but I wouldn't read that and say, oh crap, this is a replacement for primary research.
Right.
It's suggestive. But it's not a replacement.
And I want to share that. So I was just listening to your podcast recording with Isaac Rogers, and one of the things you shared with him on that podcast was, it's great if the data set exists, right? But if the data set doesn't exist, then you can't necessarily build the synthetic participants and kind of that that individual or that person or persona that might be answering the questions if you don't have that information yet. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking about this world. People, I'm talking to the people. If you're thinking about this world right now, is research still has to happen in order to teach the machines to be able to do the work that you will have to validate anyway. So it might seemingly save us some time, but there's still going to be a lot of time required to get us to a place where we're confident, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, lookalike modeling, mirroring, all those things existed forever, especially in advertising. So this is highly suggestive that we can get to a much more sophisticated version of that. But to your point, we have to have the data sets and and there's a real opportunity for research companies, especially panel companies, to play in that arena, but just as much as there are for Amazon to play in that arena, and Apple and Google and folks that are sitting on massive amounts of behavioral and attitudinal data.
Yeah, yeah. So speaking of companies like that, another thing that popped up in the news this week, I think Research Live is the one who had shared it, but our government, the U.S. government, for those of you who don't know what I mean by our, the country where Lenny and I both currently live, they have this commitment from these major players, right? These major AI firms, Meta, OpenAI, Microsoft, et cetera, a few more, to kind of work on safety and transparency and security of this AI tech. So governments are definitely going to be not only paying attention to what's going on here, but now we're going to have some collaboration to make sure that data stays safe. So good thing or a bad thing, Lenny? Could be a can of worms, but good thing or bad thing?
Well, I mean, I think good thing in general, bad thing from an execution standpoint, solely because, you get government involved and it just has complexity and it takes longer, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So this is great. And we may see something 2 years from now. Right?
Yeah.
In the meantime, things are happening really, really, really quickly. So, it's fantastic from that. But I don't know that these systems that we normally rely upon to put guardrails around new technology, if they're agile enough to be able to adapt to fast-paced changes. And there's, to my knowledge, there are no guardrails other than what people put and organizations put up themselves right now.
Right.
There is no legislation that says AI can only be used this way, and we are optimistically a year away from that.
Yeah.
And there's always the law of unintended consequences, right? I mean, look at the privacy laws, right? How long did it take GDPR to go into effect? Years, and it's still not. Or the California, the CCPA, right? I mean, these things just don't happen quickly.
Yeah.
And the pace of innovation does.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think kind of one other comment on this topic that is related to all of this, and you talked about this on the podcast as well. So plug for that podcast episode, folks. It was a really good one. Lenny and Isaac dug into this and other things as well. But we talk about companies needing to, build their moat around their data to start to do some of this training, large language model training inside with their own data to kind of keep it safe and protected, which is probably going to become a best practice, and there'll probably be best practices around how to do that. But Lenny, have you been hearing any other best practices in this world of researchers navigating AR? Because one of our audience members, JC Sebastian, he's VP Client Development at Market Excel Data Matrix in India. He started saying, as we start to think about this as an industry, do we have best practices? So I want to honor that question also.
Yeah, and big shout out to JC, right? Good friend of ours. So, no, we're making up as we go along.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So let me rectify that. I think that traditional market research best practices, especially as we think about usage of data, social media data, some of those things, those are pretty good touchstones.
Yeah.
I think that there's something that we can build off of for sure, and there'll be kind of a guiding light. My default is, look, we need to put the respondent first.
Yeah.
Data privacy and data quality; those need to be, certainly major drivers of whatever we do, and then fit for purpose. Does answer the client's business question
Right.
in the best possible way. Everything else is kind of nuance around all
Yeah.
of that. And I know that our European friends have maybe a different perspective on some of those things because it's a different, regulatory environment than the U.S. But I think those principles are fairly universal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if we keep those things in mind, then I think we'll be okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to screw up. There's going to be some mistakes made. It just, you know,
What?
that
Us?
me particularly.
Collectively, we're going to screw up.
But I think if we're trying to do the right thing for the right reasons, then
Yeah.
it'll be okay. And
Yeah.
and I encourage everybody to keep that in mind, right?
Yeah.
We don't innovate for the sake of innovation. Ooh, look at this cool shiny thing, right? We
Right.
innovate because it solves a problem and it can
Right.
do it cheaper, faster, better.
Right.
So, and that better part is what we need to focus on.
Yeah. I love that you also, called out that we do have a responsibility to be good to the respondents, which is kind of my segue into the next thing I really want to talk to you about. And also referenced on the podcast. You can tell that if I listen to one of our podcasts, then I'm full of further comments about it, especially one that I didn't host myself. So I love listening to your podcast, by the way, Lenny. It's really fun.
Thank you.
I know I'm not just saying that either. I really do like it. Anyway, we're doing good stuff. Pat ourselves on the back. The gig economy. You and Isaac had talked about it a little bit. So that was part of that episode. And then this week, it shared. The industry shared that Echo MR is growing. They've hired a few more folks, and we know that Carrie is building quite a model. Shout out to Carrie. You should do a shout out to Carrie.
Carrie, we love you, Carrie. Yeah.
And then also, interestingly, in my news feed on LinkedIn, I saw that Lila Rayner, CEO of Logica Research, she shared an article on the gig economy also. And in that one, it was a Stanford Social Innovation Review article that linked to a kind of a panel discussion webinar that was embedded that I had to listen to. And it was talking about, really, sadly, the emotional duress that gig workers are under and the stress state that they are frequently in and kind of that constant mental pressure. So it just so happened that this was a week where these 3 different nuggets about gig workers converged for me. So I wanted to just chat about that because we have a responsibility to respondents. Many of our respondents are embracing this kind of gig working model. So how do we put all these pieces together and connect some of those dots and make it better for them? I don't know, just throwing it out there.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a topic near and dear to my heart through our sister company, Savia, which was, designed 7 years ago to be a gig platform for the research industry. And I have personal bias here. I mean, really, I'm a gig worker. Right?
Yeah.
For those who don't know, I'm not an employee of Greenbook. I'm not an employee of anybody. I have lots of different contractual relationships with lots of different people. So in organizations, and that's how I make my money. That's how I feed. I pay my family, feed my family. I pay them too. I got kids. Right? It's Friday. That's the end. Here's your allowance, kids. So the.
That's how you make a living. I'll get you back.
That's how I make a living. That is how I make a living. So, and yes, it is. There's something culturally, and I think 2020 accelerated that for people to be to decouple their economic security from other elements of their lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And we did that with the workplace and et cetera, all those things. But it is a very different mindset for a lot of people to be able to function that way.
Right.
Not everybody has that kind of entrepreneurial hustle type of thing. Even I like retainers.
Yeah.
Right. So that functions as payroll. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So that stability, that balancing between stability and opportunity, freedom and security, right? Those are highfalutin concepts, but they are fundamental as we talk about this topic. Now, here's the pragmatic piece. As business changes as a result of technology and efficiencies are gained, it is a logical thing to consider that for businesses, generally their highest expense is payroll.
Yeah.
And as the tasks change, does it make sense to make that a fractional thing? I can attest from the roles that I fill. Yes, I'm nobody needs me full time, but
Yeah.
lots of people need me part time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, and
This is me not saying, yeah, nobody needs you full time.
they don't. I know. So nobody needs me full time. Nobody put up with me full time. The even Lukash at Green Book. So
Love it.
point is, so I think that's we're in an interesting time
Yeah.
where all of these kind of macro forces, and oh, and there goes the dog. All right, it's Murphy's law. Are at play. They're changing the face of work, and we came really close to the California data protection law to bucketing market research as gig workers.
Yeah.
And big shout out to Melanie and the Insight Association pushing back on that because it made our lives easier. But I sure as hell got where they were coming from.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as Layla, she's fantastic. The work that she does, that everything about that. We are just moving into a world that is. We need to recognize that research related tasks, whether it's going to a focus group, answering a survey, doing a mystery shop,
Yeah.
audits in stores, that's components that exist in all that world. Those respondents do utilize those as revenue streams, and as people are continuing down this path of having, your Ubering, and then your Postmates, and then I'm participating in focus groups or doing mystery shops. A lot of people they're making their money that way, and that's a cultural and a business trend that we have to recognize and embrace, and it may have implications again for how we deal with respondents.
Yeah, and I just think, if we step into our own personal experience, how many times have you gotten into, how many times has anybody gotten into an Uber? Maybe not you personally, but, I get into an Uber and it's a long ride. I take Ubers home from the New York airports. Sometimes those fares are high because it's, midnight on a Thursday up to from New York to Connecticut. It's anyway, and in my head, I'm like, thank you so much for doing this. I hope you are paid well for this gig, because I know Uber's getting paid quite a bit for it, but is the worker. And I think that we should also think about that when we price out studies and when we consider, really, let's stop trying to nickel and dime the people that are answering them and think about them as a human being. Like, hey, are we paying them fairly for what they're giving us? Because that matters. That matters.
Yeah. I'm a big advocate from that standpoint that, we should, the research industry, I would just put it out there, we should pay respondents based on an hourly rate. And that hourly rate's going to change based upon their role, right?
Yeah.
Consumers versus physicians, right?
Yeah, as do hourly wages, yeah.
Right. But if you spend a minute going through a screener, by God, you should be paid for that minute.
Yeah,
because ultimately, every human on the planet, and then I think this is the segue into our next topic, has a few intrinsic assets. You have your time, you have your experience, and you have your data.
Yeah.
Right? And those three things make up our identity, right?
Yeah.
Who we are as individuals. But when we are monetizing, whether we get paid a regular paycheck, or we're doing gigs, we are monetizing one of those things. And and we really need to think about it that way. Now, some people may choose that compensation to be, it's fun, right?
Yeah.
Facebook, right? Even though I'm a recovering Facebook addict, we're giving it away for free. But what's the deal? They're taking the money and they're monetizing it, right? Via advertising. That's the fair value exchange. I guess that's the point. There needs to be a fair value exchange, and we have to think about that all the time. And I just don't think we do a good job of that.
Yeah. And in our quest for cheaper, let's just really think about that and think about who's suffering when we try to hunt that down, because
well, everybody does, because the cheaper it is, that opens it up to the bots, and and so data quality suffers, the industry suffers. Our race to the bottom is not helping anybody.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, let's talk about money. Let's talk about this third topic that we had kind of picked out, which is something you spotted. I guess now it's 2 days ago, because the headline was yesterday marked the official launch of WorldCoin, and it's a human ID project. So tying our eyes and some of that kind of biometric into monetization. So I hardly even know what it is. I just know it's an eye scanner that is tied to digital currency. And now there was another article today that you were talking to me about that I didn't quite get a chance to take in. So let's talk about what really happened and then what the article today updated people on.
Yeah, so another topic near and dear to my heart, similar to the core concepts that drove the idea around Veriglyph.
Yeah.
The how do you create a system that allows people to own and monetize their own data that is secured to their identity and
Yeah.
allows the path for that monetization to be basically an annuity, right?
Yeah.
So in the case of WorldCoin, this was one of the founders, and I forget his name. My apologies. The guy behind OpenAI.
Altman, Sam Altman.
Sam
I
Altman.
have it in
Thank
the
you.
notes right there. I'm
Thank
not
you.
that
Oh,
smart.
there
folks.
you go, Sam Altman. Thank you. Thank you.
Right
Thank you.
there.
All right. Yep. There we go. And quantum systems researcher Alex Blania. Okay.
Blania.
There. Blania. All right. And they're trying to solve a problem. What they wanted to solve was the idea of how do you create basically the foundation for universal basic income tied to identity and personal data. Laudable goal. We had lots of conversations about that over the years, thinking about launching Veriglyph as well. Of course, Andrew Yang in 2016 with that presidential campaign, he was talking about those things, and he got a lot of traction. So I think all those things are great goals. Now they're rolling it out, right?
Yeah,
They kind of got there, and it's an interesting concept where they've built. I've seen videos now in malls. You go in and there's this sphere, very futuristic looking, UFO like looking. See, I got slipped one in.
Not yet. Not yet.
And you scan your iris and you create an account and you download an app, and then the app is collecting all of your data, and then they are paying $2,000 a month in this cryptocurrency, which supposedly is pegged to the US dollar.
Yeah.
For you for managing your identity and sharing your data via this platform.
Yeah. It's interesting because, I'm a Clear member at the airports. So, they're like, you just step right up, they scan your eyes, they let you go through security pretty darn quickly. And I like the time savings. And I know there's a little switch in my head that went off that said, just don't think about it. Just don't think about it. Don't think about it.
Yeah.
How I live my life actually is like I turn off the switch and the don't think about it switch. But I know it's like I think we're going to just creep a little closer and closer and closer to that with these little subtle things of this one seems okay, this one seems safe. I don't know how to feel about this one.
I'm right there with you, right? I was actually talking to my wife last night about this very topic, and it's like, wow, 4 years ago, me as an individual, right?
Yeah.
I would give talks and use the example of Minority Report.
Yeah.
The clip of Tom Cruise walking through the mall. It's like, this is great. Look where we're going. This is so convenient. All of our data, and at a purely personal level now, I'm like, I don't know about all this. That's pretty scary.
We're getting closer and closer, especially with AI. We're just getting closer and closer to some of these areas that make us simmer with discomfort.
Yes.
And if we are uncomfortable in one area of our lives, we might start to feel uncomfortable with others. And we can see now how things could go badly if not kept in check.
Yes.
So, that's why we're just uncomfortable, and we'll probably get to a new level of what feels comfortable and what doesn't. But
it goes back in all of this, and there's a theme here. We'll wrap up. So when blockchain first started, right? Our friend Rolf Swin, shout out to Rolf Swin, at GFK. Rolf gave presentations about this being the trust economy, right?
Yeah.
And the foundation of the trust economy.
Yeah.
And and I think that absolutely was true from a technical standpoint, right? We can validate and track and see where everything goes.
Yeah.
But it's bigger and deeper than that, right? And that's what we're talking about, this discomfort. There is this trust element, and I think we're just living in an era of we're good or bad, right? There's just systems have changed. We've gone through lots of cultural realignment, and there's issues of trust, right? We got trust issues.
Yeah, for sure.
And across the board, right? It doesn't matter. This is not a political issue. It's a cultural issue. And so the companies, it's the organizations we use to help us work through that, whether it's government or private enterprise or whatever, there's got to be trust,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And how do you earn that, right? It has something to do with transparency. It's got something to do with compassion, consideration,
Yeah.
values.
Yeah.
Those are hard. How do you legislate that? How do you manage that? How do you ensure
Yeah.
that the trust is really rewarded?
Yeah.
Because there's lots of things that we've trusted. We trust Google. We trust Apple. We trust them with all types of stuff. Things get hacked, right?
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
consequences, and it's just a big gnarly issue, and I don't know how it gets solved. But I think
Yeah.
it is important for us, for our industry. It goes back to, as we're talking about, we
Yeah.
need to build trust uh, with with respondents, because without their supply, without them, we do not
Right.
succeed. We need to build trust with the users of research, that we're acting in their best interest and trying to answer their business questions in the right way. And those ethical principles, it across the board, it's WorldCoin or Dynata, right? It doesn't
Right.
matter.
Anybody who's using one of those biometric measures right now, like, do a really good job.
Sure,
Do a
sure.
really good job
Yes.
making sure participants not only can they trust you, but you are living up to the trust that they're giving to you. Do whatever you
Absolutely.
can to secure their data.
Yes.
Because I know that I wouldn't even want to do heat mapping right now. I'd be a little bit worried about that, without thinking
Sure.
through what's happening with my eyes,
Yes.
just because it's getting
Yes.
closer into that. So,
Yes.
heat mapping, eye tracking, anything that's biometric right now, lock it down,
Each-
folks, and make sure you're earning trust.
Yes, EEG and fMRI. I mean, we
Yeah.
widely known. I have, a neurological condition. I have, that is an incredibly vulnerable feeling to know that
Yeah.
somebody is monitoring your brain waves. I've experienced it. I've gone through it from a medical standpoint. So to your point, yes, we needed to treat everybody with respect and care, and earn their trust across the board.
Yeah.
Whether WorldCoin or not, whether it works, it will live or die
Yeah.
on that trust element, regardless of how altruistic their goals are.
Yeah.
Whether it succeeds or becomes a dystopian hell. one way
Yeah,
or the other,
exactly.
right?
Exactly. We'll
It's
see.
we'll see. But
We'll
it's going to be based
see.
on trust.
Because we
All
all
right.
can picture dystopian hell right about now.
It's not a far reach, is it?
Not a far reach.
One way or the other.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna wrap because
All
it's
right.
like, for heaven's sakes, like, it's already nearly half an hour, 25 minutes. We can
We
talk,
went longer.
friends. We can talk.
We
so.
can. And because I think we're recording, again, for those of you who are seeing this, we couldn't pull off the live. This is a recording. We went a little bit
Yeah.
longer maybe because of that. But
Yeah.
and again, thank you for staying with us. Even though we kind of screwed up the live piece, hopefully you got value out of
Hopefully, our
this.
team that hasn't stopped talking in Slack that we've been ignoring for the last 25 minutes, hopefully they've come to some solution. But we
Hopefully.
see you. We know you're working hard.
We do. And big shout out to our team, right? They really, even though we had a snafu today, literally, you guys, you should see the Snap or the Slack chats. There's like 4 people that are all like, trying to fix it, and we're just like, okay.
Okay.
But thank you. Hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. We will be back next Friday.
We'll be back next Friday. Go ahead and give us that feedback, because as you know,
Yep.
we're taking it all in. And if there's anything you want us to talk about, give us a shout out, because we will try to work it into the mix. That's for sure. Because it's
Absolutely.
interesting, and what you're hearing is what we're hearing, and we could always learn more. So
Absolutely. All right.
cool deal.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, team.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn.
We'll chat again next Friday.
All right, cool. Have a great weekend. Bye.